Hello and welcome to Biblical Breadcrumbs, where the last sermon took long enough to record that now I have natural lighting. That's just the beauties of going over an hour on one chapter. But if you're here today, then I would ask you to turn to Matthew chapter 5. We're going to be dealing with the Sermon on the Mount, the introduction into the actual Sermon on the Mount itself. Now, last time in the Kingdom of Heaven series, we talked about Matthew chapters 3 and 4, pictures of who Jesus is and why you should listen to him. How it's so important to actually pay attention to the character of Jesus. It's about his titles and it's about what people say about him, but partly it's about who he is and his character and how he actually lives and what he decides to do with his life. He's not the proclaimed king that somebody else said he was, or the proclaimed authority figure, or the proclaimed judge, or the Son of God that God himself said so. He is humble, and he works hard, and he actually is interested in saving people. He's worth listening to, and that's what he provides to you. And so Jesus has started preaching, and he started preaching all about the kingdom. By the time you get to Matthew chapter 5, it's right after he calls his first disciples. We see mentions of, in a prior verse, I forget exactly what verse it is, you start to see in verse 17, for instance, Jesus began to preach. Matthew chapter 4 and verse 17, Jesus began to preach and say, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." He's traveling around. In verse 23, he's proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom. You see that he's started preaching about the kingdom, and the crowds are starting to get interested. At the very end of chapter 4, what you have is crowds who head up to Jesus. They're listening to him. They're coming from all around the region, and they're kind of congregating to come and hear Jesus. He's communicated that the kingdom is coming, that the kingdom is with them, that they're supposed to be working in the kingdom. But what does that actually mean is the real question. Jesus needs to communicate the kingdom to them. What is it? Well, let's figure that out. The Sermon on the Mount is Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7 is primarily supposed to communicate this idea of what the kingdom is. What does it look like? What goes into it? Who's involved? Etc., etc. And the first thing that we need to know about it is that it's not a normal kingdom, in that we mean it's not a human kingdom. It runs by different laws. It's a way that doesn't come naturally, shall we say. It comes through God, and God's commands are righteousness, but God's commands in many ways invert that which is normal to the human point of view and change it into something different. That's why the title for the sermon is The Inverted Kingdom. It's a kingdom that doesn't look like it should, according to human metrics. It's a kingdom that's not interested in geography. It's a kingdom that's not interested in bigger taxes. It's a kingdom that's not interested in, whatever physical markings that designate a successful human kingdom. That's not what we're interested in. That's not what we care about. We care about something much more important. And the thing is that the problems of earth are turned into, even the dangers and the issues of earth are in this kingdom, they're turned into glorious blessings. It is the inverted kingdom. It's not like it normally would be, but that's a good thing, because normal life isn't that great. God reversing it makes it into something absolutely wonderful for us. So, Matthew 5, here's Jesus' first attempt to communicate the kingdom to these people, and it's going to take us through verses 1 through 12 is what we'll deal with this morning. Today, whenever you watch this, is what we'll deal with today. I'm reading out of New American Standard. "Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain. And when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and began to teach them, saying, 'Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the gentle, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. First 12 verses, typically called the Beatitude section. After a quick 2-verse introduction, Jesus sees all these people. He goes up on a mountain. He begins to preach. His disciples are around him. He starts to speak to them, and naturally it would filter out to the other crowds all around him, whether by his volume or by word of mouth passing along down the line. He starts to give these Beatitudes, is what they're called. I forget exactly what the term means. I should probably look that up before Sunday evening, but who knows if I actually will or not. These attitudes, I guess, is what he's talking about, is trying to fix people's attitudes. There are certain attitudes that you need to have if you're going to approach the kingdom of heaven. If you want to be in the kingdom, it is all about... Ultimately, it comes down to absolute humility, is what we'll see first, and then everything else kind of filters out from there. What you're looking at here is a 4-section sermon. I know Psalm 1 was 2 sections, Matthew 3 and 4 was 2 sections, 2 points. Genesis 24 was 2 points. Matthew 5, 1 through 12 is 4 points. I am doing my best possible to avoid a 3-point sermon, apparently. I think I'll probably hit one next week, but that's not my fault. It just happens that way. When God decides to lay things out this way, I cannot help but observe it. I do not make the rules. I just make the observations, as some people say, and this is one of them. There are 4 main points that are being here. It's all about attitude towards different things and different objectives. Firstly, I would suggest we're talking about the attitude towards self in verse 3. When you approach the kingdom of heaven, you're going to have to do it humbly, right? How do you think about yourself? You're going to have to lower yourself and eat some humble pie, right? As people say, apparently, to recognize realistically how you are and who you are, and that you're not that great. If you want to be in the kingdom of heaven, you're going to need to recognize you're not that great. And that starts in verse 3. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You want the kingdom of heaven, you got to be poor in spirit. Well, that's an interesting term. What does poor in spirit mean? Well, it's usually taken, as I've already implied, it's usually taken to mean humble, and I think that's probably about the best interpretation you're going to find. These are people who are poor in spirit. They do not think more highly of themselves than they ought to think, as they say. This is not to say being depressed. This is not to say, looking down on yourself. We'll talk about that in just a second. But this is having a realistic view of yourself in this kingdom. If you want to be in this kingdom, you need to have a realistic view of who you are and where you're at and what you need, etc., etc. This is not a call to destroy yourself. We're not talking people who are weak spiritually. When it says poor in spirit, it's not meaning someone who is spiritually weak or someone who is not grounded in the truth. That is not what we're talking about at all. God is not looking for people who are confused about who he is or people who do not understand him. He's looking for people who do understand something very well, and it is themselves and their place in the universe. God's not looking for people who are just dumb or foolish or unaware or whatever the word is. He's not looking for people who are spiritually wimps. He's looking for people who know themselves and are willing to be realistic about where they're at. We're not talking about people who engage in self-hatred, who destroy self as some form of weird penance. That's not what we're talking about, right? God has made man in his image. You have no right to destroy yourself or to deface his work, right? I have been made in the image of God. I have no right to do terrible things to my own body. We're not talking about self-hatred here. Poor in spirit is not, oh, I'm such a bad person, or, whatever is unsatisfactory about you. That's not what we're talking about. Physically and mentally and spiritually, you owe yourself to God. We're not talking about, destroying any of those things. We're talking about recognizing that you owe yourself to God and that you are not your own master, and so you quit trying to be. we're talking about having this realistic expectation and understanding of yourself, some harsh realities of life. You have problems that you can't fix. That's okay. Quit trying to fix them, right? You can't do it. You need help. You cannot save yourself. You need someone to help you. That's where God comes in. If you want to be in God's kingdom, you have to understand why you need God and that you need God. As Jesus says later on, people who are healthy or people who think they are healthy, they don't need a physician, right? If they think they're healthy, they're not going to go to the doctor. Why would I go and waste money at a doctor's visit for the doctor to tell me that I'm fine? If you are convinced that you are healthy, if you are convinced that you are self-sufficient, if you are convinced that everything is fine with you, you're not going to go and get the help you actually need. We are talking poor in spirit. We are talking about people who recognize that we need help and we can't do everything ourselves and we are out of it. We need God to show up and fix us. We need him to be our physician and our healer for us. If you think you have all the answers, you're not going to go to God. If you think you have everything under control, you're not going to go to God. If you think that you're so important, you're not going to go to God. And if you think any of those things, if you think how great you are, you're not going to enter the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of the world, right? The kingdom of the world is obsessed with this. This idea of self-promotion, this idea of looking better than you actually are. Look no further than, oh man, this is a great sermon illustration, Instagram, right? I got to write that one down so I don't forget it. Think about that. How many people go on the internet, go on especially some kind of social media, and post something to look better than they actually are? People who, maybe it's for a workplace, maybe it's just for their friend circle, maybe they're trying to grow an influencer following, whatever it is that kids these days call it. People who pretend that they're so great and they, edit themselves and they filter themselves and they do whatever to pretend that they're so important. They want to look better than they actually are. That's what this world is about. That's what the physical world is about. That's not what God's kingdom is about. God's kingdom is the inverted kingdom, where the world glorifies self-glorification, God glorifies humility. God glorifies realism. God glorifies truth. It's more important to be truthful than it is to look good to everyone around you. If you're going to join in God's kingdom, there is no room for acting like the people of the world. If you're going to join God's kingdom, you got to be different. You have to do the opposite, which means humble yourself. God's kingdom is something that does not come easily. It's something that's going to have to be pursued, and only those who are humble, who really recognize their need for the kingdom, are going to buckle down and actually pursue it. So the command is be poor in spirit, right? The command is humble yourself. That's the only way for you to actually find entry to this kingdom. James would say, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. There's a reason Jesus starts out by saying, you got to be humble. If you humble yourself, you have the kingdom of heaven. If you're poor in spirit, you have the kingdom of heaven. That's important. You got to humble yourself first. Everything in the Beatitudes is going to stem from this kind of humility. If you don't have this mindset, if you don't have a proper attitude towards self, you're not going to get any of the rest of this. And so in many ways, instead of being a 4-point sermon, this is kind of a 1-point sermon. This is a sermon on the humility you need, and specifically it's humility in 3 different aspects. So maybe it's a 1-point sermon with 3 subpoints. We'll see how I end up putting it on the PowerPoint. The point being, you need to humble yourself. That's the prerequisite to all of this. If you want entry into the kingdom, you're going to need to humble yourself, because you're going to need to have proper attitudes towards a lot of things. Number 1, our attitude towards self in verse 3. Number 2, we're going to talk about our attitude towards sin in verses 4 through 6. Attitude towards sin. If you want to get in the kingdom of heaven, God's kingdom, the pure kingdom, the good kingdom, if you want to get in the kingdom of righteousness, sin is not going to make the cut. Sin must be removed, and it must be removed completely. And so if you take inventory of your life, you're going to realize some things need to be cut out. By the way, practical way to help gain humility, take inventory of your life really quick. Are you perfect? No, then humble yourself. Are you always good? No, then humble yourself. Do you always say the right thing? No? Well, shocker, then humble yourself. If you take inventory of your life, it actually helps you get humility in the first place. The further you investigate in yourself, the more you realize how far from perfect you really are. And that's when you start to realize you shouldn't be allowed in the kingdom of heaven. There are some massive problems standing in the way. Who are you to get access into the kingdom of holiness and righteousness where God lives? See, it's one thing for God to willingly give grace to people who ask for it. It's another thing entirely to earn it. The Bible is full of teaching that you cannot earn your salvation. Works do not save you. You cannot work your way into heaven. God has to give it to you. Only those who are willing to humble themselves and remember their sins and get rid of those, only those who are willing to truly seek forgiveness are going to make it into the kingdom of heaven. So, here are 3 pieces of advice on how to live in regards to sin. You want the proper attitude towards sin? Here are 3 ways in which you need to pay attention to it and how you need to interact with sin. Number 1, in verse 4, you need to mourn it sincerely. You need to sorrow over it. If you're dealing with sin, you need to be sorry, and even the idea of shame really plays in here. If you're going to live in the kingdom of heaven, you have to get rid of your sin. And if your sin doesn't bother you, you're not going to want to get rid of it. You're not going to care enough to get rid of it. If it doesn't bother you enough to make you uncomfortable, then why would you ever get rid of it? God's kingdom doesn't have time for that. It doesn't have time or space for people who are numb to sin. If you have to retrain your conscience, then so be it. That's something you're going to have to do. But if sin is a non-issue to you, how could you possibly be in the kingdom? The attitude towards sin begins with being sorry that you've ever done it. And if you're not sorry that you've ever done it, well, you're not going to go anywhere else. If you are not humble enough to be sorry, then there's no reason for you to improve, and you're not going to improve. If you don't humble yourself, you're not going to be a part of the kingdom. Number 2, second piece of advice for how to live in regards to sin, you need to be meek, or gentle, as this translation says in verse 5. Blessed are the gentle, for they will inherit the earth. Be meek and give it up. Be gentle. Give up all of the evil that you have. Recognize your problem, mourn it, be sorrowful over it, and then get rid of it. Meekness is an interesting term. Meekness is, it's basically just another picture of humility, or another way to say humility. But it's more than that. It's not weakness. A lot of people, when they're talking about meekness, clarify, it's not weakness. Meekness is when you are strong, but you have control of it. It's strength under control. It is somebody who has mastered themselves and is able to meter out, what should be done in a proper proportion. Basically, meekness is self-control. Meekness is being able to control yourself and do what you're supposed to do, not do what you're not supposed to do, being able to actually engage with that normally. Blessed are those who control themselves, who keep themselves away from evil. Blessed are those who don't engage with evil. Blessed are the meek. It's not enough, right? There are a lot of people, there are a lot of people who feel nothing when they sin and they don't care. There are another lot of people, especially among Christians, who feel bad when they sin, and they mourn their sin, and they're maybe even we would dare to say they are legitimately sorry over their sin, but they never do anything else. And so they mourn over it, and then keep doing it. They're so sad that they did evil, and then they go and do it again, because who cares, right? People who are sorrowful but don't actually change anything, it's not enough to feel bad when you sin. You have to actually control yourself and give it up. Mourn your sin. Give up your sin. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are gentle. And blessed are those who actually search for something good, in verse 6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Seek righteousness desperately, like it's a need you can't do without. And by the way, we should say this isn't the extent of any of these messages. You can mourn other things. Blessed are those who mourn, they will be comforted, is a truth that goes beyond the realm of sin. But it has special application when you're dealing with sin, when you're thinking about sin. They apply in special ways. Even if their generic rule is true, they're even truer in a specific sense. I will hope to write that down later. Actually, I just wrote it down now because I forgot that there was a pause button. What a glorious thing. Mourn it, give it up, and thirdly, actually seek something good. If you want to deal with sin properly, it's not enough to just be sorry over it. You have to be sorry over it, but it's not enough to just be sorry over it. You have to get rid of it. But it's not enough to just get rid of it. You have to replace it with something good. God's people are not going to be empty shells who do not have good or evil in them. Kingdom citizens are going to bear fruit, good fruit for the Lord. That's a principle that you see all over the place. You talk John 15, for example. I am the vine, you are the branches. Bear precious fruit for Jesus today, or whatever however the song goes. You get that kind of a picture. You will know them by their fruit. It's a reference that I made back last week with Psalm number 1, right? You deal with these things enough, and you start to see some repeating patterns. Kingdom citizens bear good fruit for the Lord. It's not going to be enough to get rid of sin. You have to fill yourself with something good. Something is going to consume your life. You'd better make sure that it's God. You don't want one demon to leave the house and then, sweep the house, put it back in order, and what happens? Well, the demon comes back around and then invites all his other demon bros to stay, and suddenly you have 7 demons. You don't want that to happen. That's not something that is going to be good or healthy for you. But too many people, when they get rid of the sin, they never actually fill their lives with anything good. There's a reason you mourn your sin. There's a reason you are meek, you control yourself, you get rid of that sin, and then you seek righteousness. There's a reason to that pattern. And so, just as much as this is not exclusive, again, mourning can be done over more than just sin, and comfort will come over more than just sin. Meekness should be more than just over sin, and there are blessings for those who are meek in more ways than just controlling yourself and keeping away from sin, etc., etc. You know that this is not exclusive to any of these, to just the idea of sin, but they do have special applications. Hungering and thirsting, seeking righteousness. Why is that so important? Because when you get rid of your sin, you need to fill yourself with something else. That should be our attitude towards sin. When you think about this world, how does this world deal with sin? Well, this world is, quite frankly, obsessed with sin, isn't it? That's kind of the world's favorite thing to do. The world likes to do what's comfortable. The world likes to do what's easy. And God's kingdom is it's going to be the inversion of that. It's going to be the opposite. The world is okay with you sinning. God is not okay with you sinning. The world is okay with you doing whatever it is you want to do, living life how you want, living life how is most comfortable for you. God is not interested in you being comfortable here on the earth. It's a non-issue. Why would you be comfortable here? To be comfortable here, you have to be a terrible person in many ways. Why would God want you to do that? Why would God want that for you? He's better than that. God's kingdom is the inverted kingdom. He's calling you to a better way. But that means giving up your sin and not engaging with it, because God has some high standards. Third thing we need to talk about, our attitude towards self in verse 3, our attitude towards sin in verses 4 through 6. Now we have our attitude towards salvation in verses 7, 8, and 9. When you're in the kingdom, expectations are going to be raised. When you're in the kingdom, expectations are going to be very, very high. You cannot be like everybody else. We've already looked at that, right? You can't be prideful like everybody else if you want to be part of the kingdom. You can't be a sinner like everybody else if you want to be a part of the kingdom. Your attitude has to change towards those things. You still can't be like everybody else in terms of salvation if you want to be God's citizens. Part of humility is you shelve the things that you want and you go and serve others. God is calling you to do something good. If you want salvation, you have to do the good things. If you want salvation, you have to engage in that. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, who replace the evil in their lives with something good. But there's more to it than that. What does that actually look like? Here are 3 challenges. Again, these are not exclusive. Again, you can make broader applications, but it helps to make these specific applications as well. Here are 3 challenges offered to those who actually want salvation. First challenge, be merciful. In verse 7, blessed are the merciful. They will receive mercy. That means no more grudges. That means no bitterness. That means true forgiveness. If you want mercy, you must be merciful. If you want to be forgiven, you must forgive. That's a lesson we'll learn in chapter 6 and various other places in the New Testament as well. If you want your sins removed, you must be willing to ignore others' sins. Or not ignore. Ignore is the wrong way to say it. You must be willing to forgive. You must be willing to give up taking vengeance or causing consequences for others' sins. If you want to be merciful, if you want mercy, you must be merciful. Do others deserve forgiveness for evil that they've done in general or done against you in particular? Not at all. But do you deserve forgiveness for your crimes committed against other people and against God? Not at all. So if you want to be merciful, if you want God to be merciful to you, you must live like mercy matters to you. You must live that same kind of life. You must model that. Judge not that you be not judged, for by the judgment with which you judge, you will be judged. Be merciful, for by the mercy which you show to others, you will be shown mercy. It's the same kind of principle. Not in so many words, but it is the same principle. As merciful as you are, God will only be that merciful to you. That doesn't mean you don't account for people's evils. That doesn't mean you wave over sin and brush it aside and hide it and sweep it under the rug. That doesn't mean that you ignore righteousness, right? Mercy should not be done to the extent of destroying righteousness or ignoring righteousness. But it does mean if you want to be merciful, or if you want mercy to be done to you, I better clarify this before tomorrow evening. If you want mercy to be done to you, you have to be merciful to other people first. God has been merciful to you, so you be merciful to others, or if you want God to be merciful to you, you be merciful to others. Either way you want to think about it is true and potentially helpful, depending on what motivates you personally. Be merciful. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Second challenge issued to those who want salvation, be pure in heart. Blessed are the pure in heart. They will see God. That sounds pretty cool. Be pure in heart. That means you don't think any evil. Yak, right? That means you only have righteous deeds, and you only have righteous intentions. This is all verse 8. That does not sound like something you can do on your own, does it? Certainly not easy. I'm not even sure that that's possible. Can you really do that? Well, not on your own, right? A lot of people invite corruption in, and then it takes place in their lives, and suddenly it turns into something that is much more than manageable, and it takes over how we live. God is calling you to be better than that. Be pure in heart. Don't even, as Jesus will address soon in chapter 5 still, even here in a couple lessons, God is not interested merely in your physical actions. God needs your mind. Your mind needs to be in the right place. You can't dream of filth and then pretend to be good. You can't imagine a bunch of evil stuff and then turn around and pretend like you're a good person. No, you have to be legitimate with this. Be pure in heart. Not just pure in deed, pure in heart. I should write that down. That's pretty good. Not merely pure in action. Not merely pure in deed. You actually have to be pure in where matters most, which is the heart. Jesus will say later in these chapters, if you murder your brother, that is bad. But it's more than that. You need to fix your hate problem. You need to fix your grudge. You need to fix your bitterness. If you are angry with your brother, that is just as bad. That is murder in the heart. Adultery is bad physically, but mental adultery is still a sin, right? Engaging in these things, even if you're not physically engaging in actions, engaging in improper mindsets, being impure in heart, how are you going to go to heaven, to the pure kingdom of heaven, if you're bringing all these impurities along with you? You can't. So, be pure in heart. A challenge to those who want salvation. You need to be merciful. It's not easy to be merciful. You need to be pure in heart. It's not easy to be pure in heart. Third challenge issued to those who are currently wanting salvation. Third challenge being issued is you need to make peace. Blessed are the peacemakers. Verse 9. They will be called sons of God. Do not start arguments, and do not escalate arguments that are brought to you. In verse 9. God is not interested in people fighting. There's no benefit in that. Why would God want that to happen? Instead, peace is optimal. Peace, we're told in 1 Timothy, peace is good. You need to pray for there to be peace in your city. Why? So that you have more time to dedicate to God. Peace gives people an opportunity to think about God and to spend time with God. In war, people are pretty busy with other things. Oftentimes they don't think about God. There can be a benefit to war, of course. If terrible things happen, people might rely on God more. They might start praying more. But at the same time, that's kind of forced upon them. Is that really true, legitimate belief, or is that just what they envision, what they're using for the moment to ease their momentary suffering, and then they turn right around and turn away from it? Well, that's up to God to judge. That's not my job, but it is something to think about. We're told to pray for peace, a peaceful and quiet life, that you may go ahead and focus on God in the quiet. Why cause conflict or inflame the conflict that is brought to you? Be a blessing to people. If you want to be in the kingdom, if you want salvation, you need to be a peacemaker, not a problem maker. The world is backwards on this. Again, like we would expect. God's kingdom is the inversion of the world. God is commanding all these things. The world is against all of them. The world is obsessed with winning at any cost. That means, why would you show mercy when you could instead show retaliation? If somebody does something mean to you, why not do it right back to them? Why not do it back and do it worse? Why not take them out? Why not hold them accountable? Why not, if somebody else vying for your position at work, if they do something that's slightly out of line, why not report it and get them fired? Why not do these terrible things to people just to get ahead? Why would you be pure in heart? It's fine to just imagine things that are bad. Why not just dwell in those? And instead of giving yourself to God, just allow yourself to think whatever. Maybe don't act on everything, but you can think whatever. It doesn't matter as long as you're getting ahead in life. Why not cause trouble? Why not cause arguments? Why not, work within that and use the bickering to further your own ends? The world is fine. However you want to win is generally considered okay. God's kingdom is the inversion of that. You win when you serve, not when you lead. You win when you serve, and when you lead, you should lead as a servant. You don't win when you take others down. You don't win when you hurt other people. You don't win when you cause damage to others. You win when you are a blessing. And that service mindset is how God's kingdom is built. It requires that humility we started with. That's why you need a proper attitude towards yourself. That's why you need the attitude towards sin. That's why you need an attitude towards salvation and the service that's going to come along with it. You need to figure out how to be in God's kingdom, which is so much better, so much better, so much more peaceful, so much more loving, so much more forgiving, so much more blessed than the kingdom of the world. But that is ultimately going to come with its own set of challenges. And that's why the fourth point we need to talk about is our attitude towards Satan. If you are paying attention to that or writing that down, our attitude towards self, our attitude towards sin, our attitude towards salvation, and our attitude towards Satan. I worked a long time on that, so you're welcome. I'm putting that together. Is that the best way to express all of those? Maybe not. But it is memorable. So hopefully that sticks in your mind. Our attitude towards Satan is found especially in verses 10, 11, and 12. Because, and the reason I say it's about Satan, you don't have a mention of Satan here at all, but the reason I say it's about Satan is because it talks about you getting persecuted. Life in the kingdom is going to bring plenty of trouble. You have to know what's going on, and it's no good to get surprised. If you go into Christianity and you go into the kingdom and you think it's all going to be hunky-dory and everything's going to work out fine and, nothing bad will ever happen to you if you're faithful to God, then you are, what's a nice way to say that? There's not really a nice way to say that. You're deluded and you don't really know how God works. You should probably pay attention to Matthew chapter 4, right? Jesus is more concerned with your spiritual well-being than your physical well-being. Satan has control over your physical well-being, and he will take advantage of that to destroy that, to try and drag you away from God. God is not primarily concerned with how you are at physically, with if you are the healthiest, if you are the richest, if you have the nicest stuff, if you live in the nicest area. God is not concerned with those things. Those things are not relevant. What's relevant is your spiritual life, and if you are secure in Him. There's a reason we need to be aware of these things. The New Testament says, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Jesus says, count the cost, right? If a man goes to build a tower and he doesn't count the cost, what's he going to get to? He's going to build half a tower and then run out of resources and not be able to finish the rest of it. What's the point in that? No, if you're going to build something, you need to figure out if you have the supplies to do it. If you're going to accomplish a project, if you're going to apply yourself to any work, any kind of life, know whether you're able to do it or not. And that's true for Christianity as well. Life in the kingdom is going to bring you trouble. Blessed are those who have been persecuted. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you. This is not a surprise. This should not be a surprise. It's just a fact of life. You're going to be persecuted if you are living the humble and service-oriented life, because people take advantage of that. Satan influences people to take advantage of that, and Satan keeps pushing his own agenda, so it's going to hurt. But there is one blessing for those who maintain their faithful service, and it's found in both verse 10 and 11 and 12. There is this one blessing, and that is if you are attacked, specifically if you are attacked for righteousness' sake or for Jesus' sake, in verse 11, then you're on the right path, and God will take care of you. You're blessed for that. Is it going to be painless? Nope. Is it going to be easy? Nope. Is it going to be comfortable or fun? Not really. No, God's not going to make those things just better for you. It's not going to be a cheerful road. God will see you through. It will hurt, but God will see you through it if you're faithful to Him. One note we should make here is that real persecution today is not very common, at least in America, where I live. Real persecution is not very common for Christians. If you go to, China, if you go to Saudi Arabia, if you go to some parts of Africa, yeah, persecution is absolutely common, and it happens there, and it is rather violent in many cases. Not really the case for anything in America today. But the question that arises, that stems from that, is then you're a lot freer than these other people are. Are you using that freedom to actually go and spread the gospel message, or are you not? Jesus tells us to live and expect persecution. The persecution is going to be coming. Jesus kind of tells us to live in such a way that we are persecuted, if you want to think about it that way. Jesus tells us it's not just that we're to expect persecution, it's that persecution is going to happen. A question you need to ask yourself is, if you are not getting any pushback, if you're not being persecuted, if you're not being attacked for how you're living, are we really trying hard enough? And I'm not talking about being an irritating person who's always shouting doom and gloom on the street corner, right? Those people get persecuted for good reason. They're not really helping anybody. I'm not necessarily saying you should go and do that. There could be benefit there. I'm not saying you need to go and do that. I'm just saying Jesus says you're going to be persecuted. And then a lot of us are never persecuted. Are we really being faithful? If Jesus is so confident in this, was that just a command for the first century Christians? Was that just a command for the Roman Empire Christians? Or is that true for Christians today? Because there are a lot of places in the world that Christians are still persecuted. Maybe we need to be doing more. Maybe if we're having it so easy, maybe that means we need to push further and further. Maybe that means we need to be more and more righteous. I don't exactly know. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not really keen on getting persecuted myself, but Jesus said it's coming. And so if I'm not feeling the effects, maybe I'm not engaging in his work enough. Lots of Christians never get rejected by other people because they never ask. And they never try and push anyone else towards righteousness. A lot of Christians never get rejected or never get persecuted by anyone because they don't initiate the difficult conversations in the first place. And sometimes we fall into that trap where we just assume we're good enough and we're doing enough. And Jesus said there would be problems. And if there aren't problems, well, that might be its own problem. Is it really service to others? One question you need to ask with that, is it really going to be service to others if you never help them to actually seek righteousness? If someone is lost, is it really a service to them to allow them to continue being lost? Right? If you go out into the woods and somebody has lost the path and you're on the path, is it really a disservice to them to call out to them and help them get back on the path? Of course not. But sometimes we're afraid to introduce Christianity to other people. Even though they're lost and they don't know what they're doing, we're afraid to call them back to the path, even though we do know where we're going. Is that really good? Is that really serving other people? Is that really humble? When we look at other people and say, I know you're sinning, but that's probably good enough for God. Or, I don't care enough for their souls to care about them, to serve them. Is that really enough? Is that really righteous? Is that really what God wants? Probably not. See, the world is perfectly content to let everybody go his own way. The world is perfectly content for someone to choose his own thing, and the world will just let him go right into it. The world is perfectly content to let people do whatever it is they want to. But God's kingdom is the inverted kingdom. And that means we have a responsibility. When we see someone going the wrong path, we call them back. When we see someone going into sin, we call them back. When we see someone who's messing up and who's destroying their future with the Lord, what do we do in that situation? The world just lets that person go off and do whatever he wants to do. God's people shouldn't be doing that. We're the inverted kingdom. We're doing things differently. Blessed are you when people persecute you because you choose to do the right thing. Blessed are you when you lose a friend because you tell the friend that they need to be righteous instead of doing whatever they want to do, and that friend doesn't want to talk to you anymore. Blessed are you when there are consequences to the righteousness that you have. Maybe we need to consider that more often, what God is actually talking about. If we don't care about people, and if we're not willing to put ourselves out there for people, are we really in the kingdom of God that wants people to be righteous? Something to consider. Satan, and under his influence, the world at large wants to take you away from God. He wants to emphasize, and he does emphasize, convenience over truth, and sin over righteousness, and ambivalence over care. Satan's interested in those kinds of things. But God has a noble calling, and it's going to be the opposite. It's the inversion of the things that the world wants us to do. It's humility above all, which the world does not want, but that's what he calls you to. Humility to change from evil to do righteousness, both personally and to all those around us, to call other people into God's kingdom as well. The kingdoms of earth ask you to ignore yourself and what you're doing. They ask you to ignore your fellow man and how he's doing. But God has called you to something different, which is to work for everyone's betterment, yourself and others. That's the call of the kingdom. It's a hefty call. But that's why we took a week to talk about who Jesus was. Because you're talking, the king that you're following is the king who gave up everything to help everybody else. That's where we'll leave it today. Matthew 5, 1 through 12. Hopefully that's helpful to you as you consider some of what it means to be part of the kingdom. We'll see you on Monday for the next one. I'm not quite sure what I'm preaching next Sunday morning, so I'm not sure what's going to be there, but I'll see you on Monday, and then I think I have a class I'm going to record through as well, and that may take us through Daniel chapter 6. We'll see, but I will see you next week.